The corridor is silent. Not the comforting silence of an empty building, but the kind that presses against your ears until you begin listening for something that might not be there. A single light flickers overhead, throwing long shadows across worn stone floors. Iron cell doors stand open like waiting mouths. The air is colder here than anywhere else in the prison. Then, footsteps. Slow, measured, coming from somewhere deep inside the wing. You stop. The footsteps stop. You call out. Nothing. Just as you convince yourself it was the old building settling, another sound breaks the silence. A heavy metal door slams shut. The echo rolls through the Victorian corridors, followed by something much quieter. A whisper. Too faint to understand. Too close to ignore.
She just heard leave.
I'm Nadine Bailey, and this is Haunted Canada. For today's episode, I traveled to Northern Ireland to visit and speak with Bobby Blair, General Manager of one of the most infamous prisons in the United Kingdom. This is Crumlin Road Gaol, Echoes Behind Bars. The journey begins long before the prison walls come into view. Leaving Canada behind, I cross the Atlantic towards an island where history isn't tucked away in museums. It lives in the streets, the stone buildings, and the memories of the people who call this place home. As the plane descends beneath the clouds, I see the green countryside stretch out beneath me. Then I see shipyards, church spires, rows of Victorian terraces, and the winding River Lagan. They tell the story of a city that has been shaped by industry, conflict, resilience, and renewal. Belfast is a place where every corner seems to carry a story. Some are celebrated, others are still whispered. I walk through the Cathedral Quarter, along the Peace Walls, and past the old courthouse on Crumlin Road, and it's impossible to escape the feeling that the past is never very far away. The history in this region is layered and complex. For centuries, Ireland experienced political upheaval, religious division, and struggles over land and identity. In the early 1600s, the plantation of Ulster brought large numbers of Protestant settlers from Britain into the north of Ireland, fundamentally changing the region's culture and political landscape. Those divisions continued to shape life for generations. I can't help but think about that as I stand on this historic 4-mile arterial road in the northwest of the city that used to connect Belfast with the village of Crumlin. The name comes from the Irish word Crumlin, Crooked Glen, which was the winding valley of the Crumlin River that the road used to follow. By the 19th century, Belfast had become one of the great industrial cities of the British Empire. It was famous for linen production, engineering, and shipbuilding. Prosperity transformed the city, but rapid growth also brought overcrowding, poverty, and crime. Authorities responded by constructing imposing public buildings meant to project order and authority. This area of the city in the early 1840s had a dozen or so houses, a rough hell track, and not much else. That changed when the authorities in County Antrim decided they needed a modern replacement for the old county jail in Carrickfergus, over 12 miles away. So they hired Sir Charles Lanyon in 1941. He was an English architect who would go on to shape much of Belfast and to design a building modelled in part on London's Pentonville Prison, which opened in 1842 and became the model for prisons built after it. It was designed specifically with wings radiating from a central hall, based on the design of Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia, United States. Construction on the Crumlin Road Gaol began in 1843 using local basalt stone, sandstone detailing, and Bangor blue slates. It took 2 years to be completed and cost £60,000, which was a staggering amount for the time. The prison officially opened in 1846. The timing could hardly have been more tragic. Ireland was entering the darkest years of the Great Famine. Crop failures devastated communities across the island. Hunger, disease, and poverty forced more than 1 million people to immigrate, while another million died. The social upheaval brought increasing numbers of desperate people into the criminal justice system. Some stole food simply to survive. Others found themselves imprisoned for debts or petty offenses that today might never result in incarceration. The first inmates didn't arrive by carriage. They arrived on foot. 106 men, women, and children, yes, I said children, marched for 4 hours in chains from the old jail in Carrickfergus. Some were awaiting trial. Some were serving sentences. And a handful were described in the intake records simply as lunatics. As the heavy iron gates closed behind them, a new chapter in Belfast history began. Bobby Blair is the general manager at Crumlin Road Gaol, and he said that for the next 150 years, Crumlin Road Gaol became far more than a prison.
From 1846 until 1996, and that closing year kind of surprises people a lot of the time, because when you step inside, it is like being, well, it is the only Victorian-era prison left in Northern Ireland, but you don't realise that people would have been in those conditions in 1996. Still, no running water in the cells, no toilets, no facilities.
It housed men, women, and children, murderers and pickpockets, political prisoners, and ordinary citizens whose lives had unraveled through poverty or circumstance. During its operation, an estimated 25,000 prisoners passed through its cells. Standing directly across Crumlin Road from the prison is another imposing Victorian landmark, the old Crumlin Road Courthouse. Together, they functioned as a single system of justice. Construction of the courthouse began in 1850, just a few years after the prison opened its gates. It was also designed by Sir Charles Lanyon and was completed in 1854 in the classic revival style. Its grand facade, towering columns, and symmetrical design were intended to project the authority and permanence of the British legal system in 19th century Belfast. To anyone approaching its entrance, the courthouse represented justice. For many defendants, it marked the beginning of a journey that could end behind bars or, even worse, the gallows. Bobby said men were executed within its walls between 1854 and 1961. Many are still buried in unmarked graves inside the prison grounds.
Well, Michael Pratley's been exhumed, so his grave's now empty, and so have Tom Williams. So Queen Elizabeth I, she issued the Royal Prerogative of Mercy, which meant that families could reclaim their dead. So they were both reclaimed. We know for certain where, I think it's 11 of the others are buried. The remaining, we know they're somewhere on site, but we don't know where.
One of the courthouse's most remarkable features was never meant to be seen. Beneath the busy roadway, workers constructed a brick-lined underground tunnel connecting the courthouse directly to the prison. It is roughly 300 feet, or about 90 meters, in length, and it allowed prisoners to be escorted between the two buildings without ever stepping into public view. Imagine the experience. After hearing the verdict, a prisoner would disappear through a heavily wooden door beneath the courtroom. Shackled and guarded, they would descend into the dimly lit tunnel below Crumlin Road. Their footsteps echoed against damp brick walls as they walked toward the looming prison. For those sentenced to imprisonment, the tunnel led to a cell that might become their home for months or even years. Bobby Blair said that for those condemned to death, it was the first step of a journey they would never retrace.
We're the only part of the United Kingdom never executed a female. The Republic of Ireland after partition did execute a female, but Northern Ireland never did. 17 men in total were executed in Crumlin Road Gaol. Now, you would have been able to be executed for all different reasons, but all of ours were executed for murder. So officially, no. None were underage, but there is somewhat of a question mark held over the first execution, Robert O'Neill. Some people believe that he may have been underage. He may have lied to get into the military, but officially, no, he was of age.
For decades, hangings were carried out in full public view, a spectacle that drew crowds from across the city. There's a popular myth that says that in Victorian Belfast, there was a drink for every occasion, and the drink for an execution was beer. And according to the gallows staff, after one, the city often woke up feeling ill. They say it wasn't really about the drink at all. It was about the hanging the night before. According to them, this is where the word hangover or hungover comes from. Years later, a private execution chamber was built inside the walls, and the gallows moved out of sight of curious eyes. And during all this time, thousands of prisoners passed through this hidden corridor, all while life continued, uninterrupted, above them. Horse-drawn carriages gave way to automobiles. Shoppers crossed the road, unaware of prisoners moving silently beneath their feet. Part of that history can be found today in the bookshop.
Really recently, like within the last 2 weeks, so we have CCTV and throughout the site. We went into the gift shop in the morning, just opening it up, getting it ready for the day, and the girl phones us and says, "There's a pile of books here lying on the floor," and it wasn't me. So Phelan laughs and he goes, "Of course there is." So he's straight onto the CCTV. And about 11 o'clock in the evening, nobody in the building, like the restaurant was closed. All that was on site was 2 security guards, and they don't have access to the gift shop. We have those keys, so it was all locked up. One, bang. About 30 seconds later, another one. Almost in perfect timing, 30 seconds between each. 6 books fell. What was the name of the book that fell? The only book, now bearing in mind, the gift shop, I'm sure you've seen, it's like a library. There's an array of books. Or the one book that fell, hanged at Crumlin Road Gaol. Not one other book on that shelf moved, but 6 of that one fell.
The book carries the stories of all 17 men that were hung at the prison. They are listed with their crimes, 1 chapter each. One of them was hanged at 8 a.m. on Wednesday, January 13th, 1932. Accused of the murder of a Turkish circus worker, Ahmed Musa, in September 1931.
Eddie Collins was the only Jewish person ever executed in Northern Ireland. He was executed in the jail. He was from New York. He murdered his business partner, Mahmoud Hama. He was the only one of the 17 that never confessed. And his last words in the hanging cell were, "I shall meet my maker with clean hands." Prison officers did almost feel an affinity towards him, because I don't know if they believed that he was guilty. I don't know that for certain, but ones that have fed through it seemed to be something that was always discussed in the prison, his execution more than anybody else's. And there's documentation that one of the guards that was present on the day of his execution a few days later was in the hanging cell, and Eddie appeared and said, "I told you I was innocent. Now, make of that what you will."
The rest of the political prisoners were a mixture of petty thieves, political prisoners, and even ordinary citizens swept up by the changing tides of Irish history. They all had to make the same silent walk beneath the streets of Belfast. Throughout the late 19th and much of the 20th century, the courthouse was one of the busiest centers of justice, and this is where we simply must acknowledge its role during one of the most difficult periods in modern Irish history. In 1921, following the Irish War of Independence, the island of Ireland was partitioned under the Government of Ireland Act. 6 counties in the northeast remained part of the United Kingdom and became Northern Ireland, while the remaining 26 counties would later form what is now the Republic of Ireland. The new border created 2 distinct jurisdictions, but it also left deep political, religious, and cultural divisions that would shape the decades to come. Northern Ireland was governed by a devolved parliament as Stormont, with a Protestant Unionist majority that generally supported remaining with the United Kingdom. Many in the Catholic and nationalist community, however, identified as Irish and aspired to a united Ireland. Unrest followed, and the Northern Ireland government began arresting people opposed to it and holding them without trial. Many of those political prisoners passed through Crumlin Road's cells between 1922 and 1924. One of those prisoners was Eamon de Valera. He was a revolutionary leader who later became one of the independent Ireland's dominant politicians for decades and spent a month in solitary confinement in Crumlin because he had been arrested for illegally crossing into Northern Ireland. The cells inside the prison housed people convicted of a wide range of offenses, including members of Republican paramilitary organizations such as the Irish Republican Army, IRA, as well as loyalist paramilitary groups including the Ulster Volunteer Force, UVF, and the Ulster Defence Association, UDA. Some prisoners were serving sentences for serious acts of violence, while others were awaiting trial or held under emergency legislation. The prison reflected the divisions outside its walls, with authorities taking extensive measures to keep rival factions separated. Over the following decades, allegations of discrimination in housing, employment, voting policies, and policing contributed to the growing tensions between the two communities. That led to more arrests in the 1940s and 1950s during the IRA's border campaign. By the late 1960s, inspired in part by civil rights movements elsewhere in the world, peaceful demonstrations calling for equal rights began taking place across Northern Ireland. Many of these marches were met with hostility, and violence between protesters, counter-protesters, and security forces escalated. In August 1969, widespread riots erupted in Belfast and Derry, leading to the deployment of British troops to restore order. What followed became known as the Troubles. During this time, Republican paramilitary groups, most notably the Provisional Irish Republican Army, sought to end British rule in Northern Ireland and achieve Irish reunification. Loyalist paramilitary organizations, including the Ulster Volunteer Force and the Ulster Defence Association, used violence in an effort to maintain Northern Ireland's place within the United Kingdom. The conflict also included military operations, policing, political negotiations, and acts of violence that affected communities throughout Northern Ireland and beyond. As the violence intensified, the criminal justice system became a focal point of the conflict. Emergency legislation expanded security powers. Special non-jury courts were introduced for certain terrorism-related offenses, and prisons such as Crumlin Road Gaol held individuals convicted of or awaiting trial for offenses connected to the Troubles. The prison became one of the most recognizable institutions associated with this turbulent period. It also became the scene of many dramatic events, including prison escapes. During the tense backdrop of the historic H-Block hunger strikes, which led to 10 Republican deaths before the protest was called off, 8 high-profile Republican prisoners were facing trial for serious charges. They included members of the active M60 gang, Joe Daugherty, Angela Fusco, Paul McGee, Robert Campbell, Michael McKee, Tony Sloan, Jerry Sloan, alongside Pete Ryan from County Tyrone. The unit was nicknamed the M60 Gang because they used an American-made machine gun in the 1980 attacks, including an ambush on a Royal Ulster Constabulary RUC patrol, and a separate shootout where an SAS captain was killed. They were being held in the prison, and on the afternoon of June 10, 1981, officers arrived to escort prisoners back from the visiting area. At that moment, one of the prisoners produced a handgun. The officers were quickly overpowered and disarmed. Their uniforms were taken, allowing some of the escapees to disguise themselves as prison staff. They locked staff and visitors in holding cells and changed into their uniforms and civilian clothing before moving methodically through the prison toward the main gate. Once outside, the operation became chaotic. Waiting vehicles and armed accomplices were positioned nearby. As security forces from the nearby courthouse and surrounding area responded, shots were exchanged. Under this cover, the prisoners reached the getaway cars and fled into Belfast. No prison officers were killed during the escape, though several were assaulted, and the incident exposed major weaknesses in the prison's security. It was a daring escape as they shot their way out of one of Europe's most secure facilities. The escape became one of the defining episodes in the history of Crumlin Road Gaol and remains one of the most famous prison breaks of the Troubles. Then, after decades of violence, the early 1990s brought cautious optimism. Secret negotiations, public dialogue, and growing support for peace created an atmosphere that was dramatically different, and by then it had become increasingly clear that Crumlin Road Gaol was nearing the end of its working life. For nearly 150 years, the prison had served Belfast through famine, industrial expansion, political unrest, 2 world wars, and the Troubles. But time had taken its toll on the Victorian structure, and maintaining the historic building had become increasingly expensive. On the morning of March 31st, 1996, prison officers prepared for the institution's final day of operation. The remaining inmates gathered their belongings and were transported, under escort, to other correctional facilities. One by one, the cells that had confined generations of prisoners were emptied for the last time. Then, the heavy iron gates closed for good. The prison remained empty for a decade, and sections fell into disrepair. There were discussions about demolition, redevelopment, and preservation. Ultimately, its historical significance prevailed, and Crumlin Road Gaol reopened as a public visitor attraction and conference center in November 2012. Bobby said that ever since then, the former prison has gotten a new distinction because when Crumlin Road Gaol closed its gates in 1996, its history didn't end. It simply entered a new chapter.
Well, Crumlin Road Gaol is the most haunted location in Northern Ireland.
For a place that witnessed so much suffering, fear, and loss, it is perhaps unsurprising that stories of the supernatural have become woven into the identity of Crumlin Road Gaol. Long after the final prisoners left and the iron doors fell silent, stories began to emerge from those who returned to explore its abandoned corridors.
Probably three of our most well-known ghost stories are about female prisoners that died on site. One of them, there's very, very, very little records for, but she is probably the most famous. You'll see if you type in Crumlin Road Gaol into Google and ghost and Halloween, you will get this photo up. There's a lot of people have taken similar images of a small Victorian child. We have had paranormal investigators in. There is a record of a female child dying in the prison during the Victorian-era called Isabel. All the paranormal investigators that have come in have identified this ghost as Isabel. She is about the only spirit within the jail that has the free reign of the whole building. Most other ones that you hear of will be in one particular area. They'll not really move around. No, Isabel could be anywhere. Men don't tend to detect Isabel's presence. Women do. The story of Isabel is that you will quite often feel her tugging on the back of your coat, and that's because she's looking for her mother. So that's probably the most famous ghost story in the entire prison, and it is a female. The sanitation was very poor. A lot of the prisoners that came in here, especially the children, came in with illnesses. Now, there was a hospital put in the prison, but not until 1896. So up until that point, a lot of them would have died of their illnesses while they were in the prison.
For years, visitors, tour guides, and paranormal investigators have described strange experiences inside the old prison. They've all had moments that are difficult to explain and even harder to forget.
There was a wedding on. It was a beautiful evening, party atmosphere, drinks flowing. It was just good. It was a good night. And we hear a scream from the office, and she's very glamorous. So imagine white trousers, stiletto heels, and I see this barefoot woman run past, and it was her, and I says, "What's wrong?" "Get my shoes out of my office." So I went into the office, grabbed the shoes. I noticed nothing, I was oblivious. And it wasn't until we checked the CCTV, she was sitting on her computer working away while the wedding was going on. And the bin lid flew off, went across the room, the clock came off the wall, and all of the clock hands were curled in. Now, that was the last time she went into that office. She changed offices after that. Now, that's happened to a number of clocks in the building. You'll notice there's no clock in this room anymore. There was always a clock here, just there. You can see where the nail hole is. The room next door, there was a clock in the centre. It's been removed, and the governor's office as well, all without clocks. For some reason, I don't know if it's to do with the electrics or if it is the paranormal activity or what it is, the clocks all end up off the wall with the hands curled in. There's a number of paranormal teams that'll come through, and they'll say themselves, "We don't know what that is. That could be the electrics. It could be anything," because it's a Victorian building. But there's some will tell you it's something different.
Bobby knows firsthand that working at this former prison is a unique experience.
It used to be me. I used to open the prison every morning and lock it every evening on my own. Now it's the two girls alternated between them. If one opens, the other closes, and vice versa. To be honest, in the evening, it feels fine. There's almost a calm, whereas in the morning it is a bit spookier. The morning, just because we come in so early, it tends to be dark. It's cold. No one's been in the building for a long time. You're the only person on site. Whereas in the evening, you've other people milling about. They might not be in the same area that you're in, but they're elsewhere. When I first started, and I thought, I'm going to have to open the prison, I'm going to have to lock it in the evenings whenever I got, because I started as a tour guide, so tour guides didn't have to do that. It was only when I moved into the office, you started having to run about with your keys and open and close for the tour guides coming through. I think I built it up that much in my head that I was terrified. See, once I done it, I realised nothing's going to hurt me.
Should you visit the Crumlin Road Gaol today, you're most likely going to head to the infamous underground tunnel. This is a location often associated with strange experiences. For generations of prisoners, this passage represented a journey into uncertainty. Today, walking through the narrow brick-lined passage, visitors often describe a powerful sense of history. Some have reported hearing footsteps behind them, only to turn and find no one there. Bobby says that's because the tunnel is where Officer Roberts tends to appear.
Officer Roberts died in the tunnel of the jail. You'll see whenever you go down, it's quite a depth in, and you can imagine if you were down there and you were trying to make a noise, no one in the prison would be able to hear you. They had to do a patrol of the tunnel just to check that the barriers were closed on our side and that they were closed on the courthouse side as well. Officer Roberts took a heart attack while he was doing that patrol, and he died in the tunnel. Nobody got to him in time because no one noticed he was missing for a number of hours. So quite often you'll hear it's not malicious or anything, not like with Isabel pulling or tugging. You'll just hear jangling keys, and people say that's Officer Roberts doing his rounds.
Bobby said that the site gets a lot of ex-prisoners coming into the jail, and they'll have their stories. But they've also had ex-officers come in and out. A number of years ago, a former officer became a tour guide, part-time, after he retired.
So it was quite good if you were doing a tour, you got to meet someone who had stories that nobody else would have, really, because he worked here. But he was in the tunnel area with another production team. Now they were doing, it was for a television series they were doing it for. They said there's something beside you. There's, I can see another guard, and it upset our tour guide to the extreme that he cut filming. It was never broadcast. He left. So he then he did come back to the prison, but he wouldn't go into the tunnel again. And it all transpired. It was because the person doing the recording said the officer beside you is called Jack. And that put our guide off, and he just left. We ended up finding out from him, he started as a prison officer in Crumlin Road Gaol with his friend. The friend only worked here for a short period and was moved elsewhere. But it was the friend's father got them the job in the Crumlin Road Gaol, and his name was Jack. So our tour guide then could never go back into the tunnel. He couldn't come back.
He couldn't through here. Oh my God.
Now he did come back into the prison, but never into the tunnel. That was him finished. He had worked here from I think he started here in his late teens, early 20s, and he was here right up to retirement and until the building closed. And nothing over those years, he had seen various things throughout the site, had never affected him the way that did.
He's not the only visitor to be affected by the tunnel. Others have described the overwhelming feeling of being watched, while others, Bobby said, are affected by the sounds that can be heard coming from it.
Teresa the lunatic. You will hear on occasion people say they hear giggling, they hear shouting, all coming from the tunnel. There is this story that whenever Antrim County Jail, which was in Carrickfergus when it was closing, they did march the 106 prisoners barefoot to Crumlin Road, and she was supposedly one of them. because back then, if you were a bit mad, you would be put into prison. So the prison officers couldn't take how loud and everything she was in her cell. So they used to let her just run up and down the tunnel to burn off her energy.
But she said ADHD.
And she, from what we can tell, they believe it was the tunnel she passed away in, but it may have been her cell through hitting her head
in the
repeatedly. The tunnel or the cell, I don't think it's ever been officially confirmed which area, but it was definitely on site that she died.
Visitors have claimed to hear faint voices, laughter, or footsteps that seem to come from empty parts of the building. While these accounts can't be independently verified, they have become part of the folklore surrounding the site. One of the most frequently reported areas of paranormal activity can be found in the wings.
One of the old wings, we used to use it for storage. So the catering staff would have to go in, maybe get serving trays, dishes, plates, just out of that area. And she went in and she swears blind. It was 7:30 in the morning, first one on site. She just heard leave. Now that was the last time she went into B wing. Now she still works here. She still goes into all the other wings. She'll go about the place, but just not B wing. So A, B, C and D, there's 4 wings. D wing is the largest by quite a substantial bit because it has a full basement. But on the 3rd floor, very last cell on the right hand side, no matter how warm a day it is, that cell will be freezing. No prisoner ever liked being in that cell. It was reported in Junes, Julys and August, beautiful weather, it would have had ice on the window panes. And that was the one cell. Prison officers have told us now that they would have used that as a bit of a punishment if someone was misbehaving, put them in that cell because they knew the prisoners didn't want to go into that cell. We use D-Wing for our Halloween events. So D-Wing is where the paranormal tours in the Jail of Horror would take place. Now, never the 3rd floor. Just when you're going up that far, it wouldn't be safe the way it currently is. So it would need a wee bit more refurbishment and TLC to use it.
Paranormal investigators who have visited the jail have reported unusual audio recordings, unexplained noises, and personal experiences they interpret as evidence of something beyond ordinary explanation. And of course, there are also skeptics.
We had a porter here for a number of years, and he was adamant that this was a load of nonsense. There was nothing. But all of a sudden, would not go down any of the wings on his own to lock up in the evening. Someone had to go with him and there had to be a torch. And it transpired that he thought he had felt or seen something in a cell when he was locking it up. Now, he never elaborated, he didn't go into detail, but he went from being the biggest skeptic in the whole building to someone that I still don't know if you would call him a believer, but he wasn't as brave anymore.
Perhaps what makes Crumlin Road Gaol so compelling is not simply the question of whether ghosts exist. It is the knowledge of what happened there. Every cell held someone's story. And much like Belfast and Northern Ireland, it carries the scar and legacy of history.
We have a tour called the Troubles Walking Tour. So it encompasses not only the tour of the prison, but we've partnered up with the 2 ex-prisoner organisations. So whenever you finish the tour here, you go and do a walking tour of the Shankill area, which would be the main loyalist area of Belfast, with a loyalist ex-prisoner. They then hand you over to a Republican ex-prisoner who tours the Falls, which would be the main Republican area of Belfast. And the 2 areas are separated by a peace gate. So we decided to do that because obviously the jail's now been closed, 30 years. Time's going to run out to try to get these stories.
Oh yeah.
It's already run out for some of the ex-prisoners, so we wanted to try to get as many on board early on as we could. You get the sense that with Northern Ireland's that seems to, well, touch wood, at this point in time seems to be that one ray of hope we seem to have learnt, and I don't think we will go back to where we were.
As we leave the heavy iron gates of Crumlin Road Gaol behind, it's impossible not to reflect on everything these walls have witnessed. For 150 years, this prison stood at the crossroads of history. It held the desperate during the Great Famine, the condemned awaiting execution, ordinary men and women whose lives had taken tragic turns, and during the Troubles, those caught up in one of the most painful chapters in modern Irish history. Within these walls, justice, punishment, politics, and human suffering became inseparable. Families were divided, lives were forever changed, and the echoes of that conflict reached far beyond the prison gates. Today, Crumlin Road Gaol now serves not as a prison, but as a place of remembrance. Whether you believe its corridors are haunted by spirits or simply by the memory, there is no denying that the past lingers and echoes behind its bars. Because some of the most powerful ghosts are not the ones we see in the shadows. They're the ones that history asks us never to forget. Thank you for joining me as we explore the Crumlin Road Gaol in Belfast, Northern Ireland, and a special thank you to Bobby Blair for taking the time to talk with me, and thank you to everyone at the site for touring me around, and Tourism Ireland for organizing everything. I really do appreciate it. If you want to visit Crumlin Road Gaol, which I highly recommend, it truly is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see the jail, learn the history, and also learn about all the ghost stories. I will link their website in the show notes. Do you have a ghost story, a paranormal encounter, or a true crime? If yes, email it to me so that I can cover it and share with all the listeners on this podcast. Email me through the website hauntedcanada.com. If this episode gave you the chills in the best possible way, please consider supporting the show by buying me a coffee. The link is in the show notes. Every coffee helps to keep these stories coming. And if you want to go even deeper, stay tuned because I am in the process of adding a Patreon. Haunted Canada is sponsored by the Edmonton Ghost Tours. I will link the website in the show notes. Haunted Canada is written and produced by me, Nadine Bailey, with senior producer Dila Velasquez. Production and sound design is by Rob Johnston, with help from Corey Price. If you'd like to support this podcast, please follow, share, and tell a friend about this podcast. We'd also appreciate a like and a 5-star written review. If you're on Spotify, tap follow. It helps more people find these Canadian ghost stories. Also, you can follow me on our different social media platforms, including TikTok and my YouTube channel, Haunted Canada. Hey everyone, I've got some exciting news. I'll be hosting a haunted and paranormal tour of Ireland from May 22nd to the 29th of 2027 in partnership with my friend Joanne at Expedia. We're going to be visiting haunted locations, staying in haunted castles, and exploring many historical places, all while delving into ghosts, hauntings, and paranormal activity. So be sure to bring your EMF readers with you. Everything for the tour, the itinerary, the dates, all the places we're going to be visiting, everything is listed on the website, hauntedcanada.com. Any questions, shoot me an email. Remember, space is limited, so book early. Thank you from all of us at Haunted Canada and Curious Cast. Have a good night, everyone, and stay haunted.